From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. So glad to be with you across the Sunshine State on FM and AM. Happy to have this time with you as we're going to roll up our sleeves and solve problems neighbor to neighbor. We're not going to rely on groupthink. We're not going to rely on the blame games out of D.C. It's you and I. That's the folks that matter right now, is you and I working out problems together, neighbor to neighbor. And that's the way it's going to be on A Neighbor's Choice. And we're live across podcasts right now. If you're listening on our website, aneighborschoice.com, or maybe Facebook or YouTube video live stream, make sure you share this video because the algorithm certainly won't do that. Those poor little bots have been programmed by people with stinky, outdated ideas in Silicon Valley, folks that don't understand the first thing about what makes for a good immune system, what makes for good nutrition for the human, what makes for clean energy, what makes for all these different things. You don't get that when you get really stuck on outdated groupthink paradigms like so many of the folks in the Silicon Valley tech industry are unfortunately falling into. But that's okay. Everybody has an opportunity to get on board with the personhood revolution that Jesus inaugurated over 2,000 years ago, in which we treat people as individuals, not as collective cogs for some kind of ideological tribalism. We've had enough of that, folks. Every time we try tribalism, all it does is give us stagnation and blame games and lawlessness, both in the bureaucracy, in the form of bad laws, and in the form of the more traditional lawlessness, where we see crime go up and the kind of bullying that we saw on display last night. After, Trump did his Republican National Convention acceptance speech, and I thought it was an interesting spectacle to see them turn around, and there was a operatic style singer going with all these songs. It's very dramatic, very Trumpian, very Sinatra style, kind of that old school aesthetic that Trump likes. I thought it was an interesting spectacle. And then afterwards, we saw this video coming out showing that Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky and his wife were being harassed by a vicious mob, pushing them around, pushing police into them, making them stumble and fall around, chasing them around the streets of D.C. And the contrast, I think, is clear from a political standpoint. That visual is very hard to forget, for the folks watching at home. Of course, the media runs interference on behalf of the corporate communists whenever they look bad, to make sure that the folks at home don't, see the kind of ugliness like what happened to Rand Paul, where they're, jumping in his face and screaming at him and his wife, and just really showing the ugliness of a hateful ideology going too wild. And it just contrasts with the visual of the speech that Trump gave in his, and his group at the White House. And the thing about it visually, whichever side you are leaning towards, if you see visuals of cities being burned and you see senators being harassed with their wives, and then you see people in the White House lawn actually at a function, like normalcy is somehow a possibility again, that people can actually sit on a lawn together and listen to music and watch fireworks and actually just have a moment together, even if it is this TV spectacle for political purposes. The visuals are deeper than just the talking points. The whole idea, the medium is the message. In the medium, right, seeing a senator and his wife being chased around by a vicious, screaming mob, pushing and shoving into them and that kind of thing, that contrasts very viscerally with the visuals of people watching fireworks and listening to opera music or these types of songs, patriotic songs together. It's hard to see how the people in the middle and the moderate centrists would pick going with the mob visual over watching fireworks on the front lawn. And again, this has nothing to do on this discussion with the actual, political views. This is just the more deeper persuasion level analysis of these visuals. Visuals are much, much more impactful than words and rhetoric even. Rhetoric is good. Rhetoric can overwhelm facts. That's why politicians have jobs. They can go against the facts and go against logic and bedazzle you with rhetoric. But even more deeper than that at an emotional level is those visceral visuals. And when you see people shoving into a senator and his wife because they're trying to get to the hotel, you say that versus watching fireworks in the front lawn together. You'd have to be really a marketing wizard to sell mob, vicious crowd behavior over watching fireworks in the front lawn with your friends listening to patriotic music, regardless of your political ideology. For the folks who are undecided, who can shift the election one way or another, to me, it's a pretty strong win for the Trump campaign in this moment, this week. But that's what you're going to continue to see, is this escalation of viciousness and accusation and self-righteousness. It's going to escalate continually in the next few months for the campaign. And I'm concerned about the corporate communists and the folks who have taken over so much of the mainstream discourse on the leftist ideological camp. I'm concerned what they're going to do if Trump loses. There's the one thing about what are they going to do to melt down if Trump wins? Because the media has been stoking this idea that this is a person who is far and above a threat to our values, our system, our way of life, the world peace. He's a threat to everything. That's how the corporate elite media has been spinning his campaign and his presidency for 4 years. And for people who are gullible, they buy into that. They get owned by that fear. They get consumed by that fear. And so there is a concern for if he wins re-election and they feel they're hallucinating that this unprecedented threat to everything about the republic is going to get 4 more years in their sacred seat of the White House. Can they handle that? But more importantly for me is, can they handle if he loses? Can the McWoke corporate communists handle Trump not being in their life on a daily basis in the role that he has been for some time now? Can they actually handle that? And I'm afraid it would be a hard thing to imagine, because it reminds me of the story of the demoniac in the Bible. Remember, in the town where Jesus goes to the northern part of Galilee, to one of the few enclaves of a pagan community within that Galilean community. And he goes there. It's a model town for the Roman occupiers that they've established there amidst the folks that they've conquered in Jesus' community. And it's supposed to be kind of like Epcot for the Romans. Remember, Epcot was originally designed to be kind of like a future city of tomorrow that Walt Disney had developed to kind of showcase what the world could look like into the future. Well, the Gerasenes is kind of like that. It's like this town that's supposed to show the power and majesty and might and the well-functioning system of the futuristic Romans. That's the way they perceived themselves in relationship to those they had conquered. And so it reminds me of that story in which Jesus heals the demon-possessed guy who's sick in his mind. And the text says that the community is totally afraid once the guy's healed, once he's not there to scare them anymore. They liked their demoniac the way he was. They liked having a Grinch that was over there in the mountaintop, so to speak, hanging out amongst the tombs, howling and making everybody else look good in comparison. They liked that. But when he was restored in relationship with them, when there was no distinction between him and the rest of the community, the text says in the Gospels that they were terrified of the man being normalized to fit in with the rest of them. And I'm concerned about how the left will do with Trump being normalized in the sense of not being a daily fixture of political power, that the media can make a foil out of. They have spent their last 5 or 4 years or so, I guess 4 years, spending their time obsessing over what this man says every day. Every day, from late night comedians to average folks, obsessing over trying to scrutinize what his aunt says, what his dad did, what his niece says about his life. They read these 600-page books about this man's life. It's like, the Grinch stole Christmas. There's a scapegoat, there's a boogeyman, and they read in their books about the Grinch every day. And what's going to happen if the Grinch just leaves, or if the Grinch just becomes whatever, normalized, because he's no longer the president. He's no longer in that sacred space of the White House that so many people who worship government, unfortunately, esteem too much. What will they do then to find meaning? What will they do then to measure their togetherness as a community of people who are la resistance in the fashion of the French revolutionaries? What will they do then if they don't have a common measuring rod that they can see daily, that they can say, hey, I'm part of the McWoke crowd. I'm righteous because I'm not that guy. He wants to make a deal with Taliban. Oh, we want to keep occupying Afghanis forever. We're like Dick Cheney now. Oh, he wants to bring troops home. Oh, we're pro-war mongering. We sound like George W. Bush, who we used to hate in last week's television show called Politics. You see, so many people spend their entire reality shaped around living and breathing and obsessing over Donald Trump as their boogeyman, that I'm concerned about what they will even do if the man loses. Now, there's a lot of folks on the left that are probably going to vote for Donald Trump just so they have a reason to have a sense of camaraderie with their friends, to have a reason to unite against a cause. They need that resistance. They got to tilt at some windmills. Where else are they going to have their purpose? Well, we'll continue in a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. David Gronowski here. You probably know that it's good to own some gold. Well, I want to tell you about Monetary Metals, a company started by my frequent guest, Keith Weiner. The conventional way to own gold is to buy coins at high cost and hide them at home, or pay annual fees to store them in a vault where they just sit there. Monetary Metals is different. With Monetary Metals, you buy gold just above spot and then put it to work so that you're earning interest, paid out not in dollars, but in more ounces of gold. To top it off, there are 0 vault fees. So stop having your metal just sit there. Upgrade to Monetary Metals today and start earning interest on it. Upgrade at interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
I'm attorney Young Kim. The financial problems caused by the coronavirus nightmare are not going away anytime soon. If you are behind on your credit card or mortgage payments, or bill collectors are harassing you, there are ways to get them off your back and legally wipe the slate clean. Call Consumer Law Attorneys at 888-99-FRESH for a free consultation. Learn how we can stop the bank and collection companies and help people in debt get a fresh start. Call 888-99-FRESH, 37374. Main office, St. Petersburg.
Hello, this is David Gronowski, host of A Neighbor's Choice. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, on my program each week, dissecting the news and making the case for freedom, capitalism, and a family-friendly society. Now you can join Jeff and I this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event at the Azalea Lodge in the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Noted scholar Dr. Patrick Newman and Jeff Deist will provide a fun pre-election discussion along with light refreshments. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. It's just $20 to get in, and space is limited. Join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Azalea Lodge at Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Go to Mises.org to register. That's Mises.org. See you there this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event. A Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm David Gronowski. We're live across the Sunshine State and worldwide. We got a growing audience. A lot of listeners in Norway. Welcome, Norway. Welcome to A Neighbor's Choice. Welcome to the show that's going to get things done together by empowering the human person to recognize that you have unlimited opportunity to do a lot of great things while you have this time on this earth. A lot of great opportunities around you to use your talents in a way that doesn't have to demonize or scapegoat people. Politics is a nasty, nasty mythology, and we need to get out of that. We need to grow up and get along together. And I know that most of our lives are actually the way I'm describing. Much of your life is left to basically, so much of your life is not at the edict of government and bureaucracy. Much of your life, you make choices every day without someone coercing you to do one thing or another. You'll be able to use your talents to go to this place or go to that place or use this kind of technology or, use your time in voluntary ways or to mix your time with others to make the most out of your life as you see fit. The key we need is to raise up role models that we can imitate to do those things in the free world, in the free time of our life outside of government coercion, to come up with amazing things that can make our lives better for everybody. John online says, I reckon the left will go on in a scapegoat hunting frenzy when Trump is out of office. They've already hinted at that as they haven't been successful in burning Trump at the stake. Well, one of the things that you have to do if a mob's trying to get you to, become the boogeyman that they're looking for, is that they have to coerce a confession out of you. They've got to intimidate you such that you come before the crowd and you say, whether it's a TV crowd, you're watching, someone's coming on television, or if it's a mob in a street, you have to come before the crowd and say, I'm sorry, I am a monster, I am a bigot, I am this, I have made a lot of grievous mistakes. And it's when they coerce you through intimidation, through peer pressure, it's kind of like a peer pressure, when the crowd coerces you into basically admitting that you're the scapegoat that they've made you. Now, they don't believe that you're a scapegoat. They think you're guilty of sin. Because when you're a part of a community that is blaming somebody else for your problems, in order for it to feel good, you have to literally convince yourself that they really are the monster. So someone like me, who's an independent person, I don't choose teams here. I agree with team red when they're right and team blue when they're right? And whoever else team when they're right. You just go with what's right. That, when you're like that, if you're not going against their favorite scapegoat, then you're on the team of the scapegoat. And that's how they always see it. And that's why, folks, if you end up debating with people online, if you run across one of these folks in the leftist hive mind that just cannot see anything but fascist dictatorship with Trump, and you say, well, actually, I disagree that he's wrong. I think we should, get along with North Korea. I think we should get along with Syria. We don't have to do a perpetual occupation of people of color in Syria like the leftist folks want to do for some reason. A lot of them do. And they can't handle that. They can't say, well, you're an independent person, independent thinking person, and I just disagree with you on that. They have to say, no, because you do not think 100% like me and hating this man and making your whole life around this man, therefore you're with that person. And that's the truth. We know that from the witch hunt mobs from the past, where they'd say, oh, you know the witch? Then that means maybe you're a witch too. Ha 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 ha. And that happens all the time in our legal system. You're friends with somebody who's friends with someone who's friends with that, and then you get caught up in a conspiracy charge and you're thrown away for decades. Meanwhile, the kingpin of the drug trafficking thing gets off for nothing because he works with the government. That's totally wrong. That's that scapegoat witch hunt mentality being institutionalized in bureaucracies today. And that's not right either, right? So if you say, hey, like Rand Paul, he doesn't agree with Trump on a lot of things, but he makes common alliance where there's agreement, like criminal justice reform, like undoing the record of mass incarceration that Democrats and Republican establishment folks have done for decades, locking up people in vulnerable communities for ridiculous sentencing. So Trump makes a first step, which is a small step, but it is a step. Then that's different from other steps that have been going in the opposite direction from previous administrations. And Rand Paul is a key ally in developing that. That's not good for the McWoke corporate communists in the crowd. They have to scream and yell at this man, even though he's actually doing more to save and help vulnerable communities to get government out of their lives so they can get on with their lives in peace. Rand Paul's done more for those inner city communities that the McWoke corporate communists say they represent, and yet they're still screaming at him. Why? Because he stands in an alliance with Donald Trump. Therefore, he's too close to their witch. Therefore, he is, a heretic. Therefore, he is bad. And that's just a terrible, simplistic way. Folks, I don't care what your political views are. You got to get out of that. And that goes for the right, too, because it's every human being is caught up in the temptation to scapegoat and join the crowd. And so, John, you're right. It's true that the left will probably have to go after more scapegoats. But what makes a scapegoat like somewhat effective is that they feel like they have power. And so it's just going to break apart so much of the leftist movement if Joe Biden wins, because it's like when the dog catches up to the mailman truck as he's chasing it every day, and then one day he catches up, he doesn't know what to do, right? It's the idea that once you get to that throne of power again, but it's not going to give you what you hallucinated and thought it would, which is peace on earth from government. Free college, free healthcare, free everything. Everything's just solved like rainbows and unicorns. When that doesn't happen, you're going to still scapegoat, but they're not going to feel as satisfying. It's not going to feel as, effective to keep you guys going. Because when you're looking for a scapegoat to find meaning, it's effective when that scapegoat is doing something that has real power, like being the president, like being in 24/7 media attention. And so if they lose power, if Trump loses power and Joe Biden wins, I think the left's going to lose it worse than they will if Trump wins. I think they need Trump. Remember that movie Batman and Joker? I think it was The Dark Knight, and the Joker character says, we need each other. We got to have each other. We need each other to exist. And I think that's what you're going to see with so much of the folks who've been conditioned by the media to hallucinate and think that Trump is an unprecedented evil. In a moment, we'll have representative or person running for Congress, Paulina Luna, is going to join us to talk about her race for U.S. Congress against Charlie Crist. We'll be back in just a moment. So hear what she has to say, hear what her views are on different policies, and see if there's some things that can be of benefit. Perhaps we can have a society where we can limit government and have a little bit more peaceful coexistence getting along together. Back in just a moment.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on. The madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going off.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHPO.
The day-long March on Washington today marking 57 years since Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. Renewing calls, though, today for police reform and justice following police shooting of black men and women. George Floyd's brother, Phalonis, one of today's speakers.
My brother George, he's looking down right now. He's thankful for everything that everybody is doing right now.
Floyd died in May while in police custody in Minneapolis, with video showing a white police officer holding his knee on Floyd's neck as he pleaded and saying he couldn't breathe. Testifying on Capitol Hill today, Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley says the U.S. Armed Forces will have no role in carrying out the election process or resolving a disputed vote. It comes as President Trump has claimed without evidence mail-in ballots could lead to fraud. Cleanup continues in the states where Laura barreled through as a hurricane and tropical depression. More than 600 1,000 customers remain without power in 3 states. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm your host, David Gronowski. We're live, coming to you from the heart of the Sunshine State, coast to coast on Florida on FM and AM, as well as our website, neighborschoice.com. And that's a hub that you can go to learn all about what we're doing on this media platform, which is a platform that empowers the forgotten person in America and around the world, as we have a growing audience, as I mentioned earlier, from all over the different countries that we see in the map, in Asia and Europe. And we really enjoy you being a part of the community. But now we're going to zero in closer to home, where we are broadcasting from in Florida. And that is, we have with us Paulina Luna, who's running for U.S. Congress in the Bay Area. How you doing, Ana?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you. And I just saw on your Twitter page, I wanted to get your take. You were tweeting out about this ugly scene here after the RNC acceptance speech by Donald Trump, in which Senator Rand Paul and his wife, who I've gotten to meet, were just being accosted by a very aggressive mob. And it's a very ugly scene. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, he's not the only one. There are so many people that were walking back that were just completely attacked. And I just don't think that that's really what our founding fathers anticipated this country to become. And I think it's a really good show of how partisan everything's become. And the fact is that, Senator Rand Paul is not even, he's independent. So for him to be completely just destroyed like that by BLM, and if you really notice that some of the legislation that he's put forward, especially on prison reform, I mean, it's really awful that that's the political climate that we're in. And I don't stand by, calls for violence or thinking that that's okay. It's not okay at all. And I think that really we as a country need to wake up and realize that if we don't really unite, we're going to completely crumble.
Yeah. So what do you think, what do we need to unite? How do we get past so much of the media conditioning has just baked in for millions of folks? And that includes folks here in Central Florida, in Tampa Bay and elsewhere, where they just can't see someone on the other side of their political debate as a human being like them. How do we break through that, Ana?
What I find is that in politics today, there's so many people that feel like they have to fit into this box stereotype of what it means to be an elected official, whether that's, putting on a front that you are a perfect individual or, not really having that human experience or even talking about that. And what I find is that the way that I've been able to really break through and outreach that I've done nationally and even with the campaign is by telling my own stories and really understanding that everyone does have their own perspective because of their upbringing. And if there's a commonality, a way that we can really connect with one another, it's going to be on those issues. And so, I have actually recently, I went on a segment talking about immigration with Jorge Ramos. And for me, that was nothing that I ever anticipated on happening because, from what obviously, myself, I am a conservative. But what we're seeing is that, there has been this media kind of hold and control, especially on the topics of immigration with stations like Univision and Telemundo. And frankly, it was an interesting way in conversation because, I could tell at first in the beginning of the interview, Jorge Ramos, who is very, very vocally, I think, progressive, he said, I want a respectful conversation. I'm genuinely curious about why you have the political beliefs that you do. And it was a panel discussion. And so I think that by setting the tone and by maintaining, listening, but also to being respectful in response, even though I was holding to what my values are, it really did change the way that the discussion went, right? Like we could have had, a screaming match and we didn't. We were able to actually sit down with each other, talk about an issue that we've seen the media really make super inflammatory. And so I think that it's really going to take people who are willing to come to the table, people that have experience, people that are not from Washington, D.C., people that are, from your average life, your average upbringing that can really talk on these topics. And I think that that's going to be the change that's needed because right now what we see is that in D.C., there are people that benefit from the complete fracturing of our country, whether it's through financial fundraising or whether it's through, them maintaining their monopoly. And really, until we get new people elected to office that are not part of that problem, that are not bought and controlled by the time they get in, I don't think that we're going to see any resolution on this anytime soon.
We're speaking with Ana Paulina Luna, who is representative. She's running for the U.S. House for District 13 here in Florida. And you're running up against Charlie Crist, who, when I was thinking about independent, he was an independent. He was a Republican. Now he's a Democrat. He kind of, from what I've seen over the years, kind of sees himself as a unifier, as a moderate, as a centrist. Why is that way of doing things not what we need right now? His version of being a moderate or a centrist.
So I think that that's what he tells people, right? It sounds great, but when you really look at his voting record and that you see that he's really voted in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi and the more, I'd say, radicalized Democrats that are currently trying to take over, that's not exactly who he is, right? Like we see the money that pours into his campaign from outside groups in Washington, D.C. And ultimately, Charlie will say and do what he needs to say and do to get elected. Whereas you look at someone like my campaign, I'm actually funded by people, not outside interest groups. So I've been able to raise over $1.1 million from small dollar donations. When I go to vote, I don't have to worry about voting for outside interest groups. I can vote for the people of Pinellas County. So, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually look at his voting record, look at who he is taking money from, look at his past actions and realize that Charlie's going to continue to say what he wants so that people will vote for him. And that's part of the problem. People that have been in office for, over 30 plus years that are talking about why the country is so damaged and fractured. Well, they were the ones running the country. And that's why we are the way that we are right now. It's these people that are the problem. So we need fresh voices. We need fresh perspective, and we need people that aren't controlled politicians.
One of the things that you have on your website is that you're a U.S. Air Force veteran. And one of the topics that we heard a lot in the RNC from folks like Rand Paul and Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump is we've got these forever wars. They never end. There's always some excuse to stay just one more year. And meanwhile, a lot of folks, especially in the veterans community, have had enough of these endless wars where there is no clear mission. It just seems like we're just going over there being nation builders and just really draining the morale of a lot of folks. What's your take on this whole foreign policy situation that we're in?
I think when people call for endless wars that they've never experienced the repercussions of war. And I can tell you that, in 2014, my husband was shot in Afghanistan, that I have personally lost multiple friends overseas in combat areas and theaters. And that in no way, shape, or form do I believe that we still need to be over there. And I think my wake-up moment was really when it was after my first enlistment. I was finishing my degree over at the University of West Florida, and one of our neighbors, I'd known him from the time that he was 12 years old, and he turned 18, and he came over one day, and he said, hey, Anna and Andy, I'm going to be joining the Army. And so we were talking to him a little bit about it and talking about the process of what it's like when you go to MEPS and everything you in process with the military. And then he came home on leave after he finished basic training, and he told us, yeah, I'm deploying in a couple of weeks. And so for me, I realized that, this little kid who I saw growing up, who was basically someone that I almost looked at like a younger sibling. For him to watch him grow up and go fight wars that my husband had gone to fight and that I saw even when I joined the military initially, that's too long. And there's no benefit to that. And I think now it's going to take veterans. Again, you really have to look at who's taking money from who, right? I think the people that are calling for, continuation of these endless wars, look at the PAC money that they're taking.
Yeah.
Look at who they're representing, because I can tell you that if you've really seen what I've seen and if you've experienced what my husband and I have experienced and you've witnessed what happens to the families and the guys and the men and women when they get back, you would not at all ever call for war.
Yeah, and it seems like that's one of the no-go issues for the establishment, that you don't challenge their war machine. Because, I'll give you an example. Tulsi Gabbard, she's one of the few people, she got more delegates than a lot of the folks that were represented at the DNC. And she checks all the boxes for what it means to be, an icon in today's Democratic Party for a lot of different reasons. She's a veteran. She's a person of color. She's a woman. She has all the right views for the far left. She wants universal health care. She wants free college. She wants Green New Deal. But the one thing that she has that the other folks in the DNC don't is that she's consistently against the never-ending wars. And for that, she's excluded from the DNC. So we can see that that's really the untouchable issue for the Democratic Party of today. It's not that because she's politically correct. She's for the Green New Deal. She's for everything, but she's not for the war. So therefore, she's not invited. She's erased out of the memory of the Democratic primary. So how do you intend to go up against that, such an entrenched machine in Washington that has a lot of power over both parties?
Well, for one, again, as stated, the main difference between myself and Charlie Crist is where my money's coming from. I'm going to people. I'm not going to DC. And because I do that, I can not only let them get to know me, but then they realize when they look into what money I'm taking that I'm not a candidate that's going to have to go back on my word, because I am controlled by the people, and that's it. I'm not working for Washington, D.C. I'm not working for outside interest groups. And it's not easy to run a campaign like myself, because I am, I could go to DC tomorrow and I could, pledge this, that, and the other to every single PAC up there. And ultimately I could probably bring in $1 million, but that would be kind of getting rid of the conviction that I feel that I have to really stand up for what's right. So you avoid that issue by staying clean and by doing the campaign the hard way. And that's by grassroots fundraising. That's by door knocking. That's by really getting into the community and hoping that people will see you for who you are and cut through the noise, which I do think that as of right now, there's a ton of that. There are people that are not trusting what they're hearing from career politicians. There are people that are now accessing the web and looking into websites like opensecrets.org, which is a website that you can all go to that shows you exactly who's taking what PAC money. And, I highly advise you to do it. But also, too, I think that we're in a unique point in our nation's history where we have people like Matt Gaetz and people like Senator Rand Paul and, people like President Trump who are willing to go out there and say, no, I don't stand for this, and I will fight for what I believe in. And frankly, Matt Gaetz has been a big advocate for me. And so I know that, I might not have a lot of friends in Washington, D.C., and I don't anticipate on it, especially because of, the fact that I'm a built, not bought candidate. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I do have some allies, and I think the allies that I do have are pretty strong, and that I know that I can count on them, and that's what we're really hoping to accomplish in D.C.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to touch on that has been a theme of recent weeks, of course, is the justice issue, criminal justice reform. And it's kind of a strange thing, because when I look at Biden and Kamala Harris and a lot of the folks that are on that kind of ideological wavelength, I see a weird mix. I see them talking, kind of trying to normalize the kind of viciousness, protests that are going around the country where we see dealerships being burned. We see people being hurt. We see a lot of viciousness, as we saw with Senator Rand Paul. And there seems to be kind of soft on crime on those types of attacks against property and people who are not doing anything to anybody else. But then they're tough on locking up nonviolent criminals for decades. In fact, we have Kamala Harris. I remember we have the story of Cherie Peoples, who was this woman who her daughter was sick with sickle cell anemia. She missed enough days in school, and Kamala Harris had all the media come out and watch as they arrested this mother, this woman of color, whose daughter was sick and missed too much time in school, even though she had excuses. What do you make of this weird mix where they're giving a pass to folks who are damaging innocent people's properties and hurting people, but yet they want to lock up nonviolent people for decades?
I think that that's 100% tied to the media control. So, the fact is that the story that you just told me should be getting more coverage, right? But it's not, because a lot of the media is left-leaning. And I'm not saying, just Democrat-leaning. I'm saying left-leaning in the sense that they are very radicalized. And so they will bury those types of stories. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard completely took down Kamala Harris with even some of the evidence that she brought forth, with Kamala Harris bearing evidence on an innocent man when she was a prosecutor. And I think that part of the problem is that there are not enough people in Washington, D.C. that are elected representatives that have experience with that. I can tell you that when I talk on that issue, when I talk about what's happening currently in our society, what we need to fix, I'm not from a political family. I am not from Washington, D.C. In fact, my own father was in and out of the prison system, and I had an uncle that was in a state penitentiary for a while. And so for someone like myself, I speak from a place of experience. And yes, if you are breaking the law, you should go to jail. However, when you create cycles of incarceration where people cannot get back on their feet because of what exists in their past, then you're ultimately going to see, people that are going back into the prison systems. And by all means, it's not a good thing. Some of my earliest memories as a child are me having to write my father while he was in jail and me receiving collect calls from the prison. So think about how many people are willing to actually go out and own that, though. People are embarrassed from those facts. People don't want to basically make themselves vulnerable by putting that out there. And so what I've done is I've been able to tell my story in hopes that people connect. And it is, even if it's at a smaller level, it is starting to have this chain and ripple effect. And I think that we saw it really in the primary election. I think a lot of people saw my campaign. They wrote me off. They didn't think that I was going to be able to make it. But I made it through because I had those connections with people. And I think that we need to do that in D.C. And I think that people like Kamala Harris that are saying that they want to represent, all the women, especially women of color, and you look at the facts of what their history is, you just can't stand by it. I would never stand by it. And frankly, I can tell you that I actually had a run-in with Kamala Harris at the airport in Texas. And she didn't even want to answer some simple questions on trafficking. So this woman is saying that she wants to defend women at the national scale, and that she's so proud to be, the vice president nominee, yet she couldn't even defend innocent children. So for me, I am a true seeker. I am not afraid of, going against what everyone's saying, even if I'm the only one saying it, because I have conviction. But ultimately, getting that message across in DC, the way that we'll change that is by getting people elected to office that are not part of the problem, that are not part of the political corruption that exists in our country.
Well, Ana Paulina, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And where can people, follow you or get involved if they're interested in learning more about your campaign for Congress here?
Perfect. So you can head over to my website, which is www.voteanapaulina.com, and that's Ana with two N's, Paulina.com, or you can head over to any of my social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even Parler, at Real Ana Paulina. And you can see kind of what I'm thinking. You can see events and whatnot. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us.
Well, very good. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll follow your race with a lot of interest. Hope it goes well.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Very good. We'll continue live on A Neighbor's Choice. More to come in just a moment. Stay with us. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Hello, this is David Granosky, host of A Neighbor's Choice. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, on my program each week, dissecting the news and making the case for freedom, capitalism, and a family-friendly society. Now you can join Jeff and I this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event at the Azalea Lodge in the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Noted scholar Dr. Patrick Newman and Jeff Deist will provide a fun pre-election discussion along with light refreshments. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. It's just $20 to get in, and space is limited. Join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Azalea Lodge at Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Go to Mises.org to register. That's Mises.org. See you there this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Granosky. We just heard from Paulina Luna, who's running against Charlie Crist and for the U.S. Congress in District 13 here in Florida in the Bay Area. And that was, I think there's a lot of interesting progress that can be made if we can continue on this theme of choice, of protecting human choice, right? And one of the things that I think is important is that folks have less monopolies controlling their lives. Think about media. We have way more information about real events because of the prevalence of smartphones, which every person can be their own TV broadcaster, right? They can be their own multimedia broadcaster, live streaming events at various different points of relevance in the news world of today. And they can show different angles. Look at what happened with the story revolving Nicholas Sandmann. Remember, that was an example of different angles revealing the truth that monopoly media from the old world of media just couldn't keep bottled up. And that's a great thing that we have that media decentralization take place. The same thing has to happen for all kinds of political power, right? We don't want to have one-size-fits-all food rules where the USDA can set mandates and subsidize and do all these things, micromanaging the food and innovation in that space for 330 million people or so? Of course not. You want to decentralize that power because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so, that's something we need. We need choice in education. We can't have these monopolies, even at the local level, where they are gobbling up all these resources and throwing them in bad models of education. It doesn't mean, of course, there are some superstars in the education world and government schools, but the model is fundamentally broken because when you have a monopoly, you don't have the signals you need to improve the quality of the product or service you are rendering. And it doesn't matter what your excuse is, because you ask folks who are for expanding government control over education, and they'll say, but all these excuses, you cannot repeal the law of economics, the law of supply and demand. And when you create a legalized monopoly like government has, where they gobble up so much resources, but they don't have real competitive pressure, when they don't give parents a real choice because they're already paying a lot of taxes to go to government schools, whether they use them or not. So it channels all the funding into this monopoly, and then they got to pay this higher price to go to other alternatives a lot of time. So we need school choice, because just like the media decentralization, just like having more choices, you can watch somebody who's a citizen journalist on Twitter get a story right that the old dinosaur media like NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, all those silly folks who want to massage reality to make it whatever that fits their political narrow biases. Now you have somebody with a smartphone on a Facebook or a YouTube or Periscope who can make a much bigger impact with one person challenging Goliath. And Goliath is getting a lot smaller, let me tell you, because of that decentralization. Same thing needs to happen with school. If you have decentralized media voices, decentralized models of education that are not propped up by monopoly government, you get a lot better results. And with those better results comes the foundation for a better culture, for a culture in which we can solve problems like finding answers for energy too cheap to meter that can make our productivity better, that can make our environment better without relying, again, on some monopoly like big government saying, we'll tell you what's clean energy. No, you won't tell us. You don't know what clean energy is if it slaps you in the face. You don't know clean energy, folks. They're the folks in D.C., the folks in bureaucracy, the folks in big giant corporations working hand in hand with regulators to keep the energy industry kind of hampered for their own special interests. So we need choice in media. We need choice in education. We need choice to be able to get out of these onerous regulations that have crippled and stifled development in our communities where they need it the most. So this is what we see before us. Why do you think we call this program A Neighbor's Choice? I've chosen to do this radio show because I want it to be a meeting house for a new kind of conversation, not a place for me to do the David Granosky show. Look, there's a lot of folks that have the blank show for 3 hours a day, and that's fine. But we have something bigger in store. We have something bigger in our mind, which is to unite neighbors across the tribalism, across the negativity, across the blame games. Just stop it. Let the scapegoat go. Let your boogeyman, let it go. And work on improving your life. Work on improving your community. Work on stacking talents that you have in new and creative ways so that you can innovate and make the world a better place, a more peaceful place, a more orderly place, a more innovative and creative space. We can have all of that. But it requires some courage. It requires some bravery. The bravery to look at a crowd and say, you know what? I'm not going to reciprocate the same hatefulness you're doing to me. And to look at a politician and say, you know what? I'm not going to spend my time obsessing over what you're doing. I'm going to do the best I can to excellently serve my neighbor. As for me and my house, we'll do that. I'm David Granosky. We'll see you in just a moment. If you want to email me, you can at hello@neighborschoice.com. That's hello@neighborschoice.com. Godspeed.